Growing up, we didn't waste much, especially when it came to meat. If we could stretch a pound of ground beef into something more, we did. Salisbury steak, or as we called it, poor man's steak, was one of those meal stretchers. Meat was, and still is, expensive, so any way to stretch a cheaper cut was a good move. Salisbury steak is one of those classic budget meals. Simple ground beef shaped into patties and smothered in rich brown gravy. It's hearty, comforting, and built entirely from pantry basics. Hi friend, come on in. This was a staple in my house growing up, and it still hits that nostalgic spot every time. It's the kind of meal that fills the kitchen with the smell of onions and gravy and makes you feel like everything's okay for a little while. Let me show you how it comes together with simple ingredients, big flavor, and that nostalgic gravy that makes the whole kitchen smell amazing. I'm starting with just over a pound of ground beef. I like to season this with onion soup mix. That's basically a blend of beef bouillon, onion powder, and onion flakes. It's an easy shortcut for building out big flavor. I'm adding about 1 packet's worth, a light pinch of salt since bouillon runs salty, and a healthy dose of pepper. Then 1 egg goes in as a binder, and about half to 3/4 of a cup of breadcrumbs, or panko since that's what I had. If you don't have breadcrumbs or an egg, there are a few workarounds. You can make a panade. Just soak breadcrumbs or 1 to 2 slices of bread in 3 to 4 tablespoons of milk or water and skip the egg. Rolled oats also work great for a gluten-free version, about 1/3 to half a cup. These can also be soaked to add more moisture for drier grinds. You can even mash in some beans to stretch the meat a little further. Now, you can't exactly taste raw ground beef to check the seasoning, but you can cook off a little piece in a skillet and try it. It's a good habit when you're working with any kind of ground meat mixture. That way you know it'll turn out right. I normally eyeball it based on doing this for years. Once that's all mixed until it's uniform, I shape it into patties. I made 6 from this batch, which gives me about 4 hearty portions. Try to keep them a uniform thickness so they cook more evenly. I've got a large skillet heating up over medium to medium-high heat. I'm using 73% ground beef here, so I know it's going to render plenty of fat on its own. I'm not adding oil this time, but if you're using a leaner mix, start with a little oil to help it along. Lay the patties in the pan and let them cook undisturbed for several minutes to get a deep brown crust. That sear adds flavor and helps the patties hold together. Don't flip them too early, just let them do their thing. Once the first side is deeply browned, flip them and let the second side get some color too. That deep browning, called the Maillard reaction, is what gives these patties that rich, beefy flavor and the kind of depth you'd expect from a much more expensive cut of meat. You're not just cooking the outside, you're building layers of flavor that will carry through the entire gravy later. The key is patience. Let the surface make full contact with the pan and resist the urge to move them too soon. Once they release easily and that crust is a deep golden brown, then you flip. That's when you know you've locked in that deep, rich flavor. While those are browning, I slice up a large onion. Mushrooms are great here too if you've got them. They soak up the gravy beautifully. Once the patties are well seared, I check how much fat has rendered out. Mine released plenty, enough to cook the onions. I push the patties to the side of the pan and drop in the onions. They'll release some moisture, which helps lift up those caramelized bits off the bottom. That's our flavor, and it's what gives the gravy its depth. After the onions soften, I keep an eye on the heat. Once the liquid cooks off, they'll start to brown quickly, and you don't want them to burn. I remove the patties around this point, then I turn the heat down a little and let them get tender and golden. When they're cooked through and have picked up all that fond from the pan, I scoop them out and set them aside. Once the onions are finished, it's time to build the gravy, and this is where everything you did up to this point really pays off. All those browned bits stuck to the bottom of the pan, that's going to be the flavor boost for the gravy. Don't wipe them out. If you have about 2 to 3 tablespoons of fat left in your pan, perfect. If not, add a little butter until you do. Then sprinkle in roughly the same amount of flour and stir it through the fat to form a roux. You'll see it start to absorb the fat and turn into a thick paste. Let that cook for a couple of minutes to take away the raw flour taste and develop a slightly nutty aroma. That's how you know it's ready for liquid. Now slowly pour in about 1.5 to 2 cups of beef stock or water while whisking constantly. Adding it gradually helps prevent lumps and keeps everything silky smooth. As it comes together, scrape along the bottom of the pan to loosen up all those caramelized bits. That's what's going to give the gravy that rich brown color and deep savory flavor. Once it starts to simmer, it'll thicken up beautifully. At this point, add the patties back into the pan, turning them over once to coat both sides in gravy. Make sure they're mostly submerged so they can finish cooking gently while soaking up all that flavor. Simmer for about 10 minutes until the patties are cooked through and tender. You can also add back the onions at this point too, but I like to serve mine on the side. The gravy will continue to thicken and take on even more of that beefy flavor as it reduces and picks up flavor from the crust on the patties. You'll know it's done when the gravy coats the back of a spoon and the patties look like they've been glazed in it. Rich, glossy, and loaded with umami. This is simple comfort food, but done right, it feels downright luxurious. If your gravy still feels a little thin, thicken it with a little flour and water slurry and simmer a few more minutes. If it feels too thick, thin with a little water or more beef stock. If you happen to have leftovers, which is rare with this, they heat beautifully the next day. Just simmer them gently in a little bit of broth or water to loosen the gravy back up, and it's just as good as when you made it. The flavor of the gravy alone is worth making this recipe. It's glossy, rich, and loaded with umami. It clings to everything it touches, making even a pile of mashed potatoes feel indulgent. The patties themselves are tender and well seasoned, and they soak up the sauce so that every bite feels hearty and satisfying. As a kid, I remember eating this with ketchup, so if you've got kids at your table, they'll probably do the same thing. That is the charm with these nostalgic meals, introducing them to a new generation. Salisbury steak is one of those meals that proves you don't need expensive cuts or fancy ingredients to make something that feels special. It's humble, it's nostalgic, and it builds entirely from pantry basics. I love to serve this with a big scoop of mashed potatoes, a generous pour of that rich brown gravy, and a side of vegetables to round out the plate. The onions, after soaking up all that beefy flavor, give it a deep sweetness that balances everything out. This meal is so cozy and filling. To me, this is a filling, budget-friendly meal that feels like comfort every time I make it. If you love learning how to turn simple, affordable ingredients into comforting, satisfying meals, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I've got more recipes like this coming your way. Thanks for hanging out with me today.